Uh-oh. Okay, we'll start with this. Under the radar, unbeaten, Karriss Artingstall, one of the first fighters that Boxer signed upon arriving on Sky Sports to replace Matchroom. There are many fighters who don't get the recognition or the promotion that they deserve. In simple terms, fighters who deserve a bigger push. They could be an up-and-coming undefeated prospect, a fighter who has suffered a few career defeats, but their resume hides a fighter who deserves a little more. It could even be a champion who, despite being a national or even a world champion, is still going under the radar somewhat. Karriss Artingstall is one such fighter. The Olympic bronze medalist turned professional in 2022 with Boxer and Sky, and Artingstall looked set for a rapid rise to the top of her sport. A natural built-in rival with Sky Nicholson, who Artingstall beat in the Tokyo Olympic Games. I said that myself on many occasions. For the amateur pedigree that Karriss has, and the built-in backstory that could be built up in the pros, it seems like she's moving rather slowly. You know, before you knew it, Sky Nicholson was fighting for a world title, whereas Karriss, who beat her in the amateurs, was just slugging along, and still is. Everything was seemingly set for her when she went pro, but over 3 years later, despite remaining unbeaten in 7 fights, it hasn't quite happened for her. After a steady apprenticeship, Artingstall looked set to move up the levels, but 2024 only brought her one fight. A hard-earned win over Lila Furtado in Liverpool was followed by a year of inactivity. Her turn in March was a demonstration of why there were such high expectations for Karriss at the start of her pro career. What I think is a byproduct of Karriss going with Boxer instead of Matchroom. I firmly believe that Matchroom would have got her to a title by now. At the Royal Albert Hall back in March, Artingstall emphatically outpointed Raven Chapman over 10 to claim the inaugural British featherweight title in some style. Chapman was dropped in the second round, and while she bravely didn't stop trying to turn her night around, she found Artingstall just a little too much for her. Chapman was always competitive, but Artingstall was a wide winner on the cards. It should have been the coming out party for Artingstall, but yet again, another period out of the ring followed. Like many on the female side of the sport, Artingstall has found fight dates hard to come by, a situation further complicated by her promoter losing that lucrative Sky Sports deal. In the state of limbo that followed while Ben Shalom secured another deal for his Boxer promotion is stable. There is still an element of uncertainty around many of the fighters on that Boxer roster, even with that new BBC deal Shalom has secured. But if Artingstall remains, she could be a big benefactor of that new Boxer BBC hookup. We'll see about that. As ever, and it applies to any fighter, activity is key. Artingstall has been starved of that as of late, a talented fighter who could be a real sleeper in the featherweight ranks. I agree with all of that. Artingstall looks more than capable of winning a world title. "I'm ready when they are" is a telling quote on her X account, a fighter who just wants to be let off the leash. The WBC champion Tiaria Brown, the unbeaten American who ended the world title reign of Sky Nicholson earlier this year, could be a potential route. This observer would favor Artingstall to beat Brown. Winning that WBC could also tempt Nicholson back to the featherweight division, and Artingstall versus Nicholson matchup is still a highly intriguing prospect. Artingstall, who also won medals at European and World Championships in her amateur days, has waited long enough in the shadows. At 30, Artingstall has served her professional apprenticeship. The manner of that victory over Chapman in March showed that she is ready for the elite of her division. Hopefully her opportunity on the world stage arrives sooner rather than later. That is yet to be seen. Boxer has yet to air a card on the BBC platform, and it is said by many that BBC is not providing Boxer the budget that Sky Sports was. A further impediment for getting Karriss high-profile opponents, high-profile fights. A fighter like Tiara Brown isn't going to travel to the United Kingdom to fight Karriss on the cheap. You gotta pay to play, and I don't know that Boxer can afford to do that anymore without Sky Sports behind them. It's pickle all right, but all those events were set in motion the moment that Karriss decided to go with Boxer instead of Matchroom, and since having done that, it seemed like Boxer was more invested in Karriss's then-girlfriend, Lauren Price. Because they got Lauren to a title, they got Lauren to 3 alphabet titles. But they have yet to get Karriss to 1. And Lauren and Karriss, they're not even together anymore. Yeah, Lauren married some other broad a couple of months ago, so it just is what it is. What the future holds for Karriss Artingstall, I don't know. Her wasted potential. She's wasting away over there. I don't know if she's yet able to jump ship and go somewhere else, but as soon as she can, she should. MVP or Matchroom, anything would be better than Boxer right now. Men's super lightweight news in a stunning turn of events per the World Boxing Council. Matias' promoter, Fresh Promotions, won the purse bid for his 140-pound defense versus Dalton Smith. Fresh bid 1.9 to beat Smith's promoter Matchroom, which bid 1.7 million. 10% will be held by the WBC as a winner's bonus. The rest is 70-30 in favor of Matias. Out of the 1.9 million, Smith gets 513,000. I've always felt that the real reason Matchroom loses so many of these purse bids, it's not even because they're cheaping out, since they don't seem to lose them by very much. I mean, in this instance, it's only a difference of $100,000 or $200,000. It's almost like the guys on the other side knew what they were going to bid and bid just enough to beat them out. But where does a small, local promotional outfit like Fresh Promotions get $1.9 million? I mean, that's basically $2 million from a promoter that doesn't even have a broadcast partner. Where'd they get that kind of money? What do you mean? You think somebody's tipping off the other promoter what Matchroom is gonna bid? How would they do that? Remember, to be a participant in a purse bid, you have to deposit 10% of the overall bid. So if Matchroom goes to the World Boxing Council and deposits $170,000, they now know that Matchroom's going to bid about $1.7 million at the purse bid. That's 10% of $1.7 million. At which point, someone who's privy to this information at the World Boxing Council can then auction it off to an interested customer who might use that information to beat Matchroom at the purse bid. I'm just bouncing ideas around, but that's one way it could happen. The other peculiarity, how does a small, local, promotional outfit that doesn't have a broadcast partner come up with close to $2 million for this fight? I mean, it's a decent fight for the hardcores, but it ain't that hot a ticket. It gives me the impression that Fresh Productions got the money for this bid from someone else. Someone that maybe does have a broadcast partner. Now, they're saying that the fight is going to go down later on this year on the island of Puerto Rico. Coincidentally, Amanda Serrano's ring return is rumored to be happening on the island of Puerto Rico in December. Is it possible that MVP fronted Fresh Productions the money to win the rights for this fight so that they could stage it on Amanda's undercard? But why would MVP have to be so clandestine about it? If they wanted to bid on the fight, why didn't they just participate? The implications. If someone at the World Boxing Council is tipping off the other promoter what Matchroom is going to bid, that's collusion, and that would in effect leave the World Boxing Council vulnerable to a lawsuit on the part of Matchroom for conspiring against them. With Fresh Productions, with MVP in this fictitious scenario, we still don't know where Fresh Productions got the $2 million. But if I had to guess, I would guess they got it from MVP. The major details in association with this bout have not yet been disclosed, but I think it's later going to come out that this fight's going to go down as part of an MVP show. The question now is Dalton Smith prepared to go to Puerto Rico for his shot at the big time, for his crack at the apple?
He better get his sunscreen.
As far as the fight itself, if it happens, wherever it happens and whoever promotes it, it's a fantastic fight because Dalton Smith has proven himself a somewhat hard puncher, and we all know Subriel Matias can punch.
More than that, he's a locomotive. He can throw punches in bunches from the opening round to the final round, many times at the expense of his own defense.
I mean, I like Dalton Smith, and I like what I've been seeing so far, but I'd be lying to you if I told you that I like him to win this fight, that he's ready for somebody like Subriel. I don't know that he is, and now that we know Subriel will have home field advantage, and
he's the house fighter. He's the guy Fresh promotes.
This is seeming more and more like an uphill battle for Dalton Smith, the away fighter, the challenger to the champion. I wonder if he's gonna go through with this, or with Eddie Hearns' guidance, maybe go after another title, maybe go after another belt. I don't know for sure now that this fight happens.
Adelantamos también la noticia que la Comisión Británica lo exoneró de cualquier culpa. De cualquier culpa. Entonces, no únicamente, pero le damos las gracias a la Comisión. O sea, se hizo todo lo que se tenía que hacer. No hay ninguna duda de que Jaime Munguia es un peleador limpio.
Muchas gracias. Y bueno, decirles a todos que me siento contento de probar ahora sí que mi inocencia. Siempre la verdad que he sido pues una persona limpia, un atleta limpio, que la verdad creo en que hay que estar en igualdad de circunstancias arriba del ring. Entonces la verdad para mí pues era muy penoso esto de que creyeran que había usado una sustancia ilegal para mejorar mi rendimiento físico. Entonces nada más decirles a todos que la sustancia que salió, los suplementos que salieron contaminados, no es una sustancia ilegal.
In so many words, what Fernando Beltran of Zenford Promotions said, the longtime promoter of Jaime Munguia, was that the BBBOC has exonerated Jaime of any wrongdoing, any culpability in his doping case. And he has been given the green light to return to the ring and could do so in either October or November before this year is out, and as such, his victory over Bruno Sirache still stands.
I didn't know what was going to happen with this situation because it was all so nuanced. Remember that the rematch between Jaime and Bruno happened in Saudi, and remember that the presiding commission over there in Saudi is the BBBOC, who normally hand out very lengthy suspensions, 2 even 4-year bans for fighters that test positive for banned substances. Remember, they gave former champion Zolani Tete a 4-year ban when he popped hot. But with Jaime, it's different because Jaime's not a fighter who normally fights on British soil, or Saudi Arabian soil for that matter. He's based out of America, so I wondered, in a situation where the BBBOC sanctions him, is that going to carry over to the United States where they're a lot more freewheeling about doping in the sport? America has more of a revolving door policy when it comes to doping in boxing than, say, the United Kingdom or the Japanese Commission.
The BBBOC normally hand out very lengthy suspensions for fighters that pop hot, and I wondered what's gonna happen with Jaime. Well, we see what happened. A lot of nothing.
Do you believe he's innocent?
No, I think he was doping. I think everybody's doping. Not just the fighters that get caught, but the ones who don't. I think at a certain level, when hundreds and thousands and millions upon millions of dollars are involved, if the difference between performing and not performing is a little syringe, a fighter's gonna do what a fighter's gotta do.
Then how did he beat this?
Everybody's got a price. A fighter like Jaime Munguia has a lot more money behind him than, say, a Zolani Tete. And because he's not based out of Britain anyway, it may seem like more trouble than it's worth for the BBBOC to be all wrapped up in a Mexican fighter who's based out of America.
It's more trouble than it's worth to them.
They don't care that much. If he were a British fighter who normally boxes on British soil, I could see. But because he isn't,
I don't really think they care that much.
and I think that Jaime and his people paid whoever they had to pay to make this go away so he can resume his career. I'm not up in arms about it. I've told you many, many times. I think most, if not all, of the high-level boxers are juicing because they have to. At some point and at some level, they're just trying to keep up with everybody else.
But what does Jaime do now? Who does he fight? And what's left for him?
Quite a bit, if I do say so myself. The super middleweight division is actually a deep division, but because so much of the focus is on Canelo and whatever Canelo is doing, that's lost on a lot of people, that there are actually a lot of great fights to make for a fighter like Jaime. He can fight the winner of Mabili versus Martinez, he can fight Diego Pacheco down the line, and what about a showdown with Edgar Berlanga?
Who is still coming off that knockout loss to Hamza Shiraz. And what about Hamza Shiraz?
Jaime can fight him too. There are a lot of good fights to make at super middleweight for Jaime Munguia, Jermall Charlo, Caleb Plant.
There are still a lot of good fights to make for Jaime. I think that maybe his next fight will be a stay busy fight, maybe a gimme fight en route to something bigger. I'm not sure that he comes back against a big name after settling this entire ordeal.
And does Eddie Reynoso remain in his corner after this latest fiasco? Because a lot of people were looking at Eddie with a suspicious eye, that as soon as you started working with Jaime, that's about as soon as it took for him to get popped.
Is that a coincidence? That a lot of fighters that Eddie has worked with have tested positive for banned substances at some point.
Will Eddie Reynoso remain Jaime Munguia's trainer, or will they move on to someone else? In that Bruno Surace rematch, after Eddie Reynoso takes him under his wing, and trains him for that fight, what I noticed about Jaime was that he wasn't as reckless. He took a more measured approach with Bruno instead of swinging for the fences, using his jab and setting up his punches, managing the distance as best as he could, but not being reckless. That was the biggest takeaway. Perhaps that's why he didn't knock out Bruno.
Because he took a more measured approach. Jaime's the kind of guy that normally, on instinct, takes one to give one, sacrifices defense for offense. Simultaneously, it's what makes him an entertaining fighter to watch. His flaws.
But I don't think anybody expected that Bruno Surace, a little-known Frenchman with only 5 knockouts in his CV, would be the one to finally knock out Jaime Munguia, where even Canelo could not.
Well, that's because Canelo carried him. You saw it.
No, I did. But that's not the way that history is going to tell the story. That on paper, a little-known French guy with barely any knockout power was the one to stop Jaime Munguia for the first time. At the very most, they're 1-1 with each other, so there is a precedent for a third fight.
You think Bruno's willing to go in there with him again?
I mean, we haven't seen Bruno Surace since that rematch. He's not otherwise preoccupied, and if the price is right, he might. This is prize fighting after all.
Yeah, that's a distinct possibility, but so are a lot of other fights for Jaime Munguia, who has now been given the green light to go ahead with his career.
Resume his boxing career, and we can expect to see him back out before this year is out in either October or November. That's the story.